Now for today's program, which is co-sponsored by the Alliance for Jewish Theater. AJT is dedicated to promoting and preserving Jewish theater, including the creation, presentation, and preservation of both traditional and non-traditional theatrical endeavors by, for, and about the Jewish experience. It is my pleasure to introduce today's guests. Avram Mlotek is a rabbi, cantor, licensed social worker, and writer. Avram co-created Amid Falling Walls, a new musical featuring Yiddish songs written during the Holocaust, which premiered this past fall. Kholos Brooks is an award-winning playwright. Michelle's most recent play, Room 1214, is based on interviews with teacher Ivy Seamus, who was teaching a Holocaust history class when a gunman began shooting into her classroom. Room 1214 was a finalist for the Ashland New Plays Festival. David Herkovits is the founding artistic director of Target Margin Theater in Brooklyn, New York. David is the co-creator and director of the new play, Remember This Trick, which explores American anti-Semitism, stories of Jewish survival, troubling conspiracy theories, and the trickster spirit that will save us all. Joining Avram, Michelle, and David is theater director Willow Jade Norton, who is currently the executive director of the Alliance for Jewish Theater. Please welcome Avram Mlotek, Michelle Kholos Brooks, David Herskowitz, and Willow Jade Norton.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. And thank you, Michelle, David, and Avram to this moment. This is going to be such a fun experience for us today. I'd like to begin offering our audience and our panelists a moment to have a breath together. So let's inhale and exhale. There's so much to unpack around making art in times of conflict. I know that we can't get to everything, so I invite our guests and audience to plant seeds for future conversations and more questions. I also offer compassion to ourselves and to each other. Making art is personal and vulnerable, and I desire in our time today that our artists feel safe to bring their full selves into the space and share from their truths. Welcome. Thanks to each of you for making art that unpacks difficult moments and inspires dialogue on the complexities of the human experience. All of your work has moments of grand theatricality and rightfully demands to be theater. My first question is, do you find the medium of theater to be a way in to ask the hard questions? And this can be for anyone that wants to jump in. Do you find the medium of theater to be a way in to ask the hard questions? Go, Michelle.
Sure. Hi, thank you. Yeah, what I love about theater, my background, I came to theater actually pretty late. My background is as a journalist. I was in public radio for a long time. And there were a lot of conversations that I was able to have, but what was missing for me oftentimes was the emotional component of it. And so what I love about theater is that we are literally stuck in a room together and we have to have these emotional experiences together in real life. Like we all really literally have to breathe together, which is something that we weren't able to do for a very long time. And I think that being, I mean, I don't mean this to sound so hard, but like it's sort of being forced to sit in a space together and have these experiences together, have these experiences together can open ourselves up for bigger conversations outside the space of the theater. We can't put it on pause. We can't eat popcorn. We can't even run to the bathroom most of the time. So I think being a little bit stuck in that space together kind of gives us the opportunity to feel something together.
Thank you. Avram or David, do you want to speak to that? Or I can just go to the next question too. We can always pass. Oh, David, do you want to speak to it? You're just on mute.
No, just to say that I respond very much to what Michelle was saying, and that any form of art has if done richly, can open up space for questioning, and if you, to me, certainly ought to do that. But I think that the embodied presence of theater, like the live event, time bounded in space together, has a very unique and special power. And if you love theater, it is, for me, it's in large part because of that, as against any other form. They're all wonderful, but I agree with Michelle very much in that way. And I will say personally, I want to, Willow, do that the very I hope this makes you smile, Jewish thing of answering your question by questioning your question. But I don't, when I make work, I don't actually think of myself as raising questions or asking questions. I'm more interested in creating a kind of space that we share, a physical space, but also a space in the language and in the events of whatever's happening and the flow of it all, the music of what's happening, in which those questions will arise, or people have the space to exercise those questions and that questioning. So it's just a slightly different framing for me when I think about how I make work.
I love that. Thank you, David. And I see Avram nodding. This is great. Well, this kind of ties into my next question, where I ask, what are some of the questions you want your work to ask right now? And have your questions shifted in this time of conflict? So maybe it's not your questions, but it's some of your container around the moment. I don't know if you want to respond to that, David.
Sure. So frame it again for me.
Sure.
Has my questioning shifted? Has it shifted in this moment? Is really the heart of it?
Yes.
My Lord, I hope that what I do is always responsive to its context in a lively and immediate way. I think that's very essential for me. And the context in this extended moment has been, as we all know, extreme and challenging and complex in very particular ways. So yes, I certainly hope so. And certainly in making the work that brings me to this panel, I started making the work, envisioning, discussing, planning, workshopping this long before last autumn and October 7th. And so then I found I was working on the same project, but the world had changed, which of course meant that what I was working on would need to engage with that in some ways. So to be very specific about it, I found myself in a very different context and had to rethink how I was addressing things I was addressing or hoping to address and initiate.
And this is for your show that just closed, Remember This Trick.
Exactly. Remember this.
Great. I'm wondering if Avram and Michelle, you've had similar experiences where you were working on something during, this late last fall and early beginning of the year where your work has had to shift in response to the world.
Sure. I similarly to David, this Amid Falling Walls, or Zwischenfallendig event in Yiddish, this project that showcases music and poetry from the ghettos and clandestine theaters and labor camps across Eastern Europe during World War II, has long been in the works. But our first day of rehearsals was October 9th. And it just took a profound new resonance for everyone involved in the project, to be singing specifically these songs and to be learning this material and to to tap into that period of history amid our own unfolding drama. And because we were dealing with such such historical and sensitive material. We were mindful of just that, and wanting to let the material sort of speak for itself. Of course, we knew what the audience was going to be coming into the house, with potentially feeling or imagining and holding, but I don't think we could have ever foreseen the type of resonance, and again, this idea of history continuing to unfold and repeat itself before our eyes, both on the world stage and on the stage.
Thank you so much. Michelle, did you want to speak to this at all?
I had the same experience. My upcoming play, Room 1214, which is about it started as gun violence, but it because the gunman shot into a Holocaust history class, it became, I find that a lot of my plays, I sort of start somewhere else, and then somehow it ends up intersecting with my Judaism, which has been really interesting for me. And yeah, this classroom, they were literally doing reports on hate crimes when this kid with swastikas etched into his boots and his bullets shot into this classroom. And so talking about this intersectionality of hate and gun violence, and then to see this hate being played out on this world stage, which is, in some ways no surprise, and then in some ways just continues to be shocking. I don't know that it changes the play, but it certainly deepens it. In a number of different ways, and I'm very aware of the audience coming to the play with different questions that they might have been asking pre-October 7th. So yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is it's always, once you're putting it on stage, it's always dynamic, right? You don't know what the world's going to throw at you. And sometimes I say, I wish I've got a couple plays where I wish they would be irrelevant. Be very happy for them to be irrelevant.
Thank you. Going off this idea of audience, have any of you found your relationship to audience or your community to shift in this moment and with the rise of anti-Semitism? I've heard from, I'll add a little to that. I've heard from some theater artists that they have found that their audiences have grown because people are looking for a sense of community and to understand a sense of belonging in this moment. And then I've heard from others that their audiences have shrunk or shifted or changed. I've wondered if that's been the case for any of you, that your relationship to audience has shifted or stayed the same in this moment, or who you're reaching out to. And I can always come back to that. That's okay.
I can say one thing, and it's not about Room 1214, but at my another play of mine, Hitler's Tasters, which is you guys featured a few years ago and is now running here in Los Angeles, is a dark comedy about the young German women who are conscripted to taste Hitler's food for poison. And it's always been, there have always been people who say, I absolutely refuse to see your play because it's got the H word in it. And then there are other people that sort of come running toward it. And I have to say that what I'm encountering with it right now is very interesting, even more polarized in some way. But I have to give credit to, like, this theater that I'm working with in LA right now, Rogue Machine Theater, has this giant banner on Melrose Avenue with Hitler's Tasters across it, and it's bright pink, and there's a sort of a cartoonish version of Hitler. And just last night, as I was leaving the theater, two people walked up to me and said, "Oh, do you know anything about that play? And I said, oh, as a matter of fact, I know a couple things about it. And so people were I'm seeing people like kind of on the street being attracted to it. But I do have certain, I do hear sometimes from Jewish community people that just will refuse to see it. And right now it seems even more, loaded for them.
Thank you.
Can I weigh
Wanna-
in on that one?
Go for it, Avram.
Thanks, Willow. I when I would try to describe, this project that I've been working on for so long to my friends, they always would turn back to me and say something like, really, Avram, like a Yiddish Holocaust musical. And your Hitler in Neon Lights is what sparked this for me, because as a native Yiddish speaker, the language of the more than 6 million who perished, and as a grandchild of Holocaust survivors, I feel this, and as a Jewish educator, I feel this innate responsibility to share with an audience, or with those who might not have experienced, or been exposed to, at least this particular body of work. Of course, there have been, whether it's cabaret or others, right, where you get glimpses into the Jewish experience during World War II. Ours was a project that really featured the voices and authentic, words and music of Jews living in that time. And I think that was a balance, it was a constant balancing act in terms of not wanting to be too pedantic over, over the course of the play, of the piece, as we're sharing this work with new audiences, but also being very much mindful that there's a Yerusha here, right? Like an inheritance or a legacy that we also are part of, that we're all part of. So I think that dance was there throughout.
Thank you. That speaks to one of my questions. How do you see or wish artists to play a pivotal role in bringing community together? And are there any particulars that you've done, in the last couple of months around your work that has been about gathering community?
I mean, I feel that I can speak to that maybe in some different ways. This relates to your earlier question too. I work primarily with other people in a small theater company that we share here in New York, and it is not particularly identified as a Jewish theater. I'm a Jew, but our audience is quite diverse and ranges wide. So we have had, I think, some wonderful success gathering different communities for different conversations in the space that we have, either for performances or for dedicated events where there's a decision at a particular moment to say, hey, this is open to a particular group, which could be defined in any number of ways. And in fact, we're planning more of these things over the coming summer and fall. So it's been a subject of discussion, because it seems like, because we have a space that's basically a garage in Brooklyn, it has a roll gate, and it's a very kind of concrete box basically on the street. So it lends itself to these kind of very open and relaxed gatherings in a way. And we try to take advantage of that, because it's something we can do that's powerful, that I think theater can do. So that's been very meaningful, I will say, in many ways. In the case of this particular show, the funny thing is, I had a totally different relationship to the audience, because it was so Jewish themed. The material was so personal to me, and so directly connected to that community and its history in all of its complexity and diversity. And so I thought, wow, what's going to happen? Who's going to come? And then there's this very interesting thing of like, there are certain things that you might say, jokes you might make, stories you might tell within the circle of Jews. and that you might not tell or you would frame differently if it were a mixed group. And so that was sort of a fascinating thing that we talked about and worked on in the performance. I don't know if I'm responding to your question, but there you go. Free association.
No, I love that. That's fantastic. Did Michelle, you want to share any ways that you see or wish artists to play a pivotal role in bringing community together?
Well, I mean, I think that's always the hope, right? That you're
Yes.
offering an opportunity for people to gather. I like to I really like to, when I have a play that's connected to some kind of issue out in the culture, like I love to help get talkbacks together that are sort of riffing off of the play and expanding the conversation. And sometimes I feel like that's really valuable, but it's always like you throw it up and you hope people people will stay after the show. You never really know, but I think when it happens, I think it's pretty powerful. And I find my just general maybe frustration as an artist is, it's just like getting it out, and how do you get people in, and how do you, when you want to share something, it's not usually my responsibility to do the marketing, although I feel like we probably all do as much marketing as we can for our own work. But there's always that question, like, how do you get people in that will want to participate in the, not even necessarily the talk back, but in the conversation of the play.
Thank you. I'm interested in Avram, you mentioned responsibility, the sense of responsibility, which I feel, yeah. And I'm curious if Michelle and David, you want to speak to the sense of responsibility of representation in this moment to tell Jewish stories, or what it means to be identifying as Jewish as a storyteller in our field. Has anything bubbled up for you in this moment? And Avram, you can of course comment on this too. That just spurred that question. And some of this can also be about just having the privilege to have a platform. All of you are established artists that get to say things, and people want to hear what you have to say. So is there something in getting to have a space to say something in a sense of responsibility?
I mean, I feel an enormous responsibility in those ways, and the attendant stress upon that, concern about how people will respond and whether I'm comfortable with people like things or they don't like things, they may respond differently. And I'm very comfortable with all of that. I have no problem with that friction. I just want to make sure that I feel that I'm doing whatever I'm doing intentionally and responsibly to the material and to the people it's connected to. And in the case of something connected to me so personally, I think I felt that very acutely. I don't think I've ever agonized about a show as much as I did about this last one. Clearly, because it was so personal to me, and all the work one makes is personal, right? I mean, it's all you, I think, if you're really working deeply. But this was so directly personal, and I'm hoping that Michelle and Avram can tell me how they think about this, so I'll have better tools to cope with it in the future. Please help me.
Avram, that's on you.
Come on, Rabbi.
I'll just say really quickly that I don't think about responsibility going into it. I mean, of course, I want to make sure that I'm honoring everything that I need to honor. I want to make sure that the story is being told in a responsible way. For me, that means oftentimes doing a lot of research. But I think for me, it's what David was saying about connection. For me, it's so much about saying like, this is, do you see this? This is what I'm seeing. Do you see this? And like my responsibility maybe is very, very personal, which is I am seeing this, and this is, I need to scream about this in some way. And are you seeing it? Are you feeling it? And then what, are we having something together? And then maybe together we can take this out into the greater world. But I don't know that I go into it feeling like I'm carrying that. I just want to honor, what the story is, because a lot of my stories are based on true events. So that part I feel very responsible for.
Thank you, Michelle.
I
Go,
think
Avram.
I think there can be a beautiful or holy tension though in wanting to honor the story, right? Especially if it's based on true events, and right, the responsibility to do it right, or to do it accurately, especially, at least I felt that in the context of this project, which felt like it was like unearthing historical artifacts and trying to share them with the world, but in a theatrically compelling way, an emotionally honest way, and a way that fit into our arc and what we were trying to build. And so I think, that's in many ways, I suppose, the nature of the work. But I think I think of the teaching of the Mishnah, right? You're not obligated to complete the task, nor are you free to desist from it altogether. So, I suppose you just keep trying and failing, or hitting the mark, or who knows? I mean, if you fail or don't hit the mark, your audience and fellow Zoom members will probably let you know. But I can be my own harshest critic. So, yeah, I think when we're dealing with real people, for if that's the meat of the work, I think that responsibility takes on an extra focus. That's all.
Well, and then as project leaders, when you're gathering who is going to be in the room with you, how are the stories going to be told? I'm curious about, have any of you done some container holding before the work begins, or anything to set a place of safety in this moment? Because like David, you shared that your work was very personal, and a lot of folks that I, come into the room with have given circumstances that are in alignment with maybe some of the stories we're telling. So have any of you found ways to help set a space that is safe to get to the work? Or at least acknowledge that there is a big world out there where things are happening and people are vulnerable.
I find that when I go into a rehearsal, I'm usually just pretty honest and open about why I wrote something, why I feel the way that I do about it. And I can get a little emotional. And I think that I just need to, the people that I'm working with, I want them to see that I'm willing to be vulnerable around it, and I'm willing to be emotional around it. And so I hope that gives them license to do that as well. I mean, theater people are pretty responsive to that, and they want to be able to access that, but it can feel tricky, and you can feel vulnerable. But I think just to be honest, I mean, what have we got to lose, really?
Thank you, Michelle.
I will say, it's interesting because it's worth clarifying that when I'm making work often, each project is different, but in this particular project, I was inviting people into a space with me to make the work together. I brought in certain source material, I brought in certain ideas, but I worked with different groups of people over, as I say, this started a couple of years ago. And so I felt maybe a more extreme responsibility to create the kind of space that you're talking about, Willow. And I feel quite strongly about that. Because I was asking people to do more than, say, an actor or a designer in a conventional situation might do. And this included designers and production people and stage management and administrators, like many the participants in this group, and this is how I like to work, or it's not like there were artists and then there were support people. It's like everybody was just a human being who was having this conversation to make the work. And that was very intentional. But it takes a lot of time and a lot of sustained conversation. I talked more about it. I talked so much when new people were considering joining us or were joining us, when groups would assemble after a break, we would always like just, I put a lot of effort into making sure everybody was clear about what we were doing, had space to talk about what they did or didn't want to do, like all that stuff, which is all very obvious. It just takes work. You just can't, I can't assume any of that. So I think I tended to overdo it that way, but I was happy overdoing it.
Thank you. How does one make something beautiful in dark times? That's one of the questions of our gathering today. And do you feel the need to do so? This is a time of conflict, and for some it's very, very challenging. So do you feel a desire to make something beautiful in dark times or not?
I guess I'm not, I don't know about beautiful. I mean, I hope that there is something elevated that is found in the work. I hope that there are moments where people feel connected to something bigger than themselves, and that I think can be beautiful, I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't say how angry and scared and frustrated I am with the world. And I don't think that, just standing up there and screaming and lecturing people is probably the way in, to get people to connect. But I do feel like I don't know that I'm starting from a place of beauty, but I do hope that in trying to express some of these feelings that there is something more lyrical and more beautiful that can come out of it. I mean, I certainly think that's a much better way in to be able to connect with people, and also humor. I think that humor is one of the most important ways to connect with people. Laughing can be, I think, quite beautiful when the jokes work out.
That's great. Thank you, Michelle. David or Avram? Are you compelled to make something beautiful right now?
Avram, I never know if you're about to speak or not.
Neither do I, David.
But you're speaking now.
Indeed.
Continue.
Listen, darkness abounds. Darkness abounds. There is beauty within darkness, just existentially speaking. I mean, that's the nature. I'm sorry, but again, that Amid Falling Walls is the name of our piece, and it comes from a song that the 20-year-old poet Hirsch Glick, who is a partisan and a poet, wrote that became to be known as the Partisan's Anthem, writing things like our song was written with blood, not with lead, and so on and so forth. It was so popular, it was sung among some of the first fighters for Israeli independence. I mean, the idea that people sung in times of such terror and horror, isn't that beautiful and tragic and inspiring and horrific? And so, I mean, human beings, that's what we do. We make art, and we're also depressive and angry, and so we're surrounded by the darkness too. And Rabbi Nachman says all distance is closeness ultimately. It doesn't mean that I know how, David, so I'm going to throw the mic back to you because I think
course.
you might know a little bit more than I do on, but I do believe that, or I think that,
Yes. No, I respond so much to what you're saying, Avram. I'm so glad to listen to it because I don't, one way I frame this for myself is like, well, I can separate beauty from pleasure. Right? Like there's a way in which when you ask the question, Willow, there's one answer, which is like, there's a kind of consolation in a bad moment that we seek, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I also want to make something that's just pleasurable because it consoles us, because we can create a space that we can celebrate or enjoy in a much more direct way. And so that's not wrong, but that's not all of what beauty is. And I respond more in a way as Avram does by saying, by thinking about the beauty of embracing all of this complexity and creating what that experience is. So both of, and both of those dimensions are, I hope, to work in and beyond. But I just want to emphasize, I'm very happy to create something, moments in the theater that are purely pleasurable. That also is lovely. Nothing wrong with that, you know. It's just not the end of the story.
Thank you. I appreciate those responses. I mean, in good theater, you have dark and light, so you can experience the fullness of both. I'm curious about what type of stories are you compelled to tell right now? I know that you probably all have many things that you're currently working on that maybe started a year ago, a month ago, and that you're in the mix. But if I was like, okay, I have a budget for a project, what type of story do you feel that needs to be told right now, or that you need to tell right now? And it could be a genre, it could be anything. I'm just curious what's coming up.
I am preparing a production of a musical called Showboat that will happen in New York in January.
Love that. Michelle, Avram, are there certain types of stories you're compelled to tell right now?
I am so deep right now in Hitler and gun violence, and it's just, these are things that I've been wanting to tell for a long time. I mean, frankly, the gun violence piece of things makes me absolutely just lose my mind, and I was very grateful to find a way to talk about it. I wasn't expecting the story to land in my lap, and when I found it, I knew that that was my way in to be able to talk about this. So I'm that play is getting ready for production in New York this fall, and so I'm very much involved with that and trying to make sure I get that one right. It's hard to think past it at the moment.
Thank you. Avram, do you want to weigh in on anything you're compelled to tell right now?
I'll pass for the moment, but may return.
Great.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I feel, Willow, I
Yeah.
feel like I should clarify, because I was making an assumption, which is that everybody would know this, that it was kind of self-evident, but I think I should say it. Showboat is much avoided because it's enormously problematic racially in many, many ways. And so I was smiling as I gave that report and kind of signed off, because essentially I experience it as a continuing and expansion of my concerns about American anti-Semitism in a different way, viewed nationally in the United States. It's not the same thing, but those things relate for sure. It's like my personal tour of American bigotry.
I want to see it. I'm as a Jewish artist in this world right now, I'm thinking a lot about what am I doing to make the world a better place, right? There's this idea, and I am not someone that can, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not someone that can build houses for folks. I keep thinking about that I'm a storyteller, and all of you are storytellers. So what is it in your work, or what are you hoping to do in your work to make the world a better place? It's a big one, and it could be little things.
I think I'm just going to say that I don't have grand illusions of changing the world. I would like to think that, you know, when I have a full house of 40 people at the current theater that I'm in right now, that will have an impact on the world. But what I do feel very strongly about when I'm talking about things that matter to me is that I just always I always hope with my work, and it all sounds so serious right now, but I guess it is in a way, that people will always just come away with just a reminder about the dangers of complacency. It's like a little thing back here to remember to stay engaged, to not pretend that things aren't happening that are happening. And so I always feel like, if, for instance, with room 1214, with my gun violence play, if 3 people are moved to march or have gun legislation in mind when they vote, that they talk to their kids about it, that they're just a little bit, that they're maybe not turning it off, maybe they're not getting so attuned to it that they stop feeling it when they see it on the news. So I'm always hoping for those like 2 or 3 people that maybe bring it forward. The world is a little big for me.
Thank you, Michelle. Avram or David, do you want to share?
Would you mind saying again the question?
Sure. Let's see here. It was about how, you know what, I can't even find the exact one. It was basically, how do you want your art to make the world a better place?
Yeah, or I don't yeah, maybe I appreciate the antenna around complacency, because I think I hold this idea of, you know, to maybe first to appreciate just maybe how non-beautiful the world can feel sometimes, sort of to shine a light on those moments and places, be they physical or spiritual. But you know, the Talmud says that a human being is a small world. So I think that in that regard, every tuchus in the seats counts.
I love that.
Yeah, I will say that I very much aspire to influence the people who come in contact with my work, so that when they leave the work and re-enter the world, they are re-engaged with the world in a more lively, rich, complicated, interested way, a way that leaves them more open to the strangeness and difference that surrounds them in all the other people, you know, in this world.
Thank you, David. I just did my gesture of hand on my heart. I'm going to go to Suzanne and welcome you back. Are there any community questions
Yep.
that you'd like to bring to us?
Yep, thank you all very much for that important conversation. I'm going to combine 2 questions. One is last year there were protests around Parade when it was on Broadway. And so the question is, have you ever experienced protests surrounding work that you have done, and how have you handled that? And then the question is about censorship. A lot of comedians are feeling censored in this moment, feeling like they can't tell the jokes that they want to tell. And have you at all ever felt that you have censored your work that you have put out there? Michelle, have you had any kind of protests around? I know you spoke a little bit about it, but when you were trying to get Hitler's Tasters off the ground?
Yeah. Yeah. I was never lucky enough to have a whole protest, but I have had definitely some pushback. There was actually, I started writing Hitler's Tasters. You know, Suzanne, it has anachronisms in it, and it very much references our current culture. And but you know, it implies a lot. It's not directly. Anyway, there was a theater in Connecticut that was supposed to be doing it, and they were going to bring in young audiences, and I was going to come out and talk to them, and they were going to use it as like an opening conversation about to get into World War II. And it was during an election year, and they decided to cancel the play because they said it was a red area in a blue state, and that their audience wouldn't like the references to our current politicians. To which I said, well, we aren't talking about Hitler, but apparently that was controversial. So I had a little bit of that, and as I said, I've had a couple of I have a couple of critics who've refused to review it, but not a full scale protest. But I do think about, you know, I mean, some of the humor I think is a little bit flirting with disaster, but I don't know. I feel like generally it's might as well just kind of go for it and see what happens and let the chips. I know my intention. I know my intention. If I can't really control how it gets taken sometimes. But I have had people ask me after the plays occasionally, you know, was it okay that I laughed? I'm always like, yeah, please do. We need it.
The second to last performance of Amid Falling Walls had a small protest in front of the Holocaust Museum by anti-Israel protesters due to someone who was featured on the talkback panel afterwards, and the show went on. That's how we dealt with it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Right now, the current situation, obviously, there's a lot of divisiveness, especially on college campuses. There's a lot of us versus them going on. How can theater be a tool to bring people together, educate people, that's going beyond just coming and sitting and watching the play? Are there other ways that you can use theater in this moment?
That's a good question.
I know you talked about the talk back. Has anybody worked with students, whether they be high school, college, to actually help them create their own plays? They don't have the experience of doing it yet.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, our company works with young people and also with seniors and other neighborhood people in all kinds of different ways. But and so there are those possibilities of outreach and conversation. Specifically to your question, though, you know, the work that we do is really very intentionally and I hope in a committed way, not about taking positions or relaying information. I think there are other things that do that much better than theater does, and it's just not why I go to the theater. So I think that it's very appropriate to respond vividly to the demands of this moment as any individual perceives them and in the way that you want. For me, that's not in a theater, it's out of the theater. Like if I want to get engaged, I want to go talk to people, or I want to show up at something, or I want to listen to other conversations and educate myself and try to engage with people in a meaningful way. But that's not why I make plays. It's a different kind of space artistically. That's just for me. I'm aware that for other people, it might, I think I'm at one end of the spectrum in that sense. So if anybody, we never have protests because nobody knows what the hell the play means.
Thank you. On the reverse, somebody would like to know if they know of any upcoming Jewish theaters that are dealing with what's happening with the situation, or might be pretty quick for anything to be coming out, but if anything is being worked on at the moment.
Not that I'm aware of, although I'm curious. I'd be surprised if people weren't working on this because I just said we don't really do things that way, but I think lots of other people are energized too.
And as we
Yeah.
wrap, oh, go ahead, Willow.
I was just going to share that, the AJT community is producing lots of different work right now. Some of these are new works in reading stages, so they've been able to respond to, some of these big questions in the world. And we always have an events calendar on our website, alljewishtheater.org, that lists all of the different plays that are happening all over the world that are. Some of them are meeting this moment and in different stages of development. So that's where I most of the time get to find where these things are happening.
Great, thank you. And as we wrap up, someone wrote in and said that they're an author and they were advised that making Jewish content at this time would not be advisable. And so they're going in a different direction. What are your thoughts on that? Is now not the time, or is now even more of the time?
I feel very strongly that as an artist, you should write what you need to write. And, it doesn't expire. I mean, writing doesn't expire. You might have to update things over time, but maybe people aren't buying. I mean, I've heard this before. I'm surrounded by a lot of artists who are not writing this thing or that thing because the gatekeepers are telling them this isn't a time to sell it. Well, by the time you finish it, it might be. Or also, I just don't think we should be tamped down that way. I mean, the struggle is always getting it out there, and if your motive is to to make what you need to make to support yourself right now with your work, then that's a different story. But if you're talking about the stuff that speaks to your heart and that you feel like you most have to say because only you can say the thing, it's hitting you a certain way, only you can say that thing in that way, then I think it has to be said, and I think it has to be told. And I think if we all sat around, waiting for the gatekeepers to tell us exactly when our work is meant to be told, then nobody would get anything done. I think it's the people that are, I think it's being brave and putting your work out there and getting a lot of rejection. I mean, a lot of rejection, but sometimes it squeaks through and it finds its moment. And I don't know. I don't think we should hold ourselves back that way.
Anyone else? Nope. Someone just typed in, sounds like censorship if people are being told not to make their Jewish art now. All right. Any last words on this? Willow, anything else you wanted to add?
I just wanted to say thank you so much to Michelle and to Avram and to David and to you, Suzanne. These conversations, I think, are planting seeds for all of our future projects and collaborations and connections, and they're really important. So I just really appreciate everyone making the time to sit here and connect together.
Thank you. And I too want to thank, go ahead, David.
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you also.
And I too echo thank you to everyone and thank you to the audience. I want to let everybody know that I will send a follow-up email and will include a link to this recording so you can feel free to share it with others, as well as links to Avram, David, and Michelle's websites and AJT's website so you can see all the work that they are doing. And we ask you to go to momentmag.com where you can register for our programs that are coming up. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Take care.